Good morning, Nate. Today in geography, we're going to take a look at our assessment for Chapter 2. I have here our Google Classroom page. On the classwork page for Tuesday, what would be our assignment on the actual page itself. So I've clicked on this and opened it up. I'm going to read through the instructions and then we'll walk through what you should probably do to be successful on this assessment. First thing it says, read through the Chapter 2 summary to review for your test. So I have attached this summary PDF and we'll go through that in just a minute. Then I want you to watch the instructional video on how to access and complete each portion. Free help on the essay is at the end of the video. If you have successfully completed each of the quizzes from last week's lessons, you're going to find that finding the test and completing the test online is going to be the exact same process. It should hopefully be something that you're used to and able to do to be successful at this. Next, you're going to complete the test on that e-assessment. So I have those links provided, and this video itself will be posted here as well so that you can watch this on how to access and what you're looking for in the actual test itself. Let's look at that PDF for the chapter summaries. Here's what it looks like. It's given chapter summary as the title, Lesson 1, Planet Earth, and talks through each and every aspect that we read through. What I would do is just make a point to take 5 minutes and read through each of these bullet points to recall what was the main topics in each lesson. From Lesson 1, we learned about planet Earth, about its rotation, its orbit, the different layers of the Earth, the physical systems in the hydrosphere, lithosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere, how it's tilted and that creates the different types of movements or the different shifts in our seasons. So we have what were called the equinoxes and the solstices that create the different times of year for what would be the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And then we finally talked about the factors that influence climate. And those are listed here: elevation, wind, ocean currents, weather, landforms. We talked about the difference between weather and climate and how sometimes those things can obviously affect how people live and why people live in a specific area. After Lesson 1, you studied Lesson 2, the changes in Earth, the dynamic aspect of Earth. It says that our crust is moving, these tectonic plates move from place to place. When they move, there can be major earth-moving events such as earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. Those are kind of the big natural disasters that take place because of that dynamic moving Earth. Here we have another aspect of our Earth changing over a longer period of time, the difference between weathering, erosion. Weathering, the breaking down of something. Erosion is the exiting, the moving on of those items to other parts of the world because of the power of water, wind, and or ice. And then lastly, our Earth changes drastically because of our human activity. Things such as coal mining, blasting tunnels, digging canals, cutting forests, all the things that we're doing to use the resources that we're given on Earth are parts of the way in which we're changing the Earth. When the Earth was first created and the population was much, much smaller, especially just in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, there was less of this human activity. Now that there are millions upon billions of people living on this Earth, what we're using in this world and how we're developing this world is having a lasting effect on the Earth. Lastly, in Lesson 3, we talked about that land that was used and the water. We learned about the different landforms and how those bodies of water interact. We grouped those different landforms based on their elevation, location, and the process of how they're formed. We learned about the different continents. The land masses, the 7 continents are Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America. They're bordered by those 4 oceans, or 5 oceans if you consider the Southern Ocean, right? All those oceans are connected, so technically it's one large ocean, but the way in which we label those for location-specific items is with those particular names. We talked about the different freshwater resources outside of what would be oceans and seas, lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, bodies of freshwater, and how those things work together to create the opportunity for people to have food, to work on those types of items, transportation that's created from water, and obviously recreation. We have this awesome, amazing process in the creation of our world that the water actually recycles itself so that it can be used time and time again through this entire process called the water cycle. And unfortunately, we come back again to the human influence in the world in the form of pollution in those water resources. So if you've read through this document, you should have a quick summary of all the things that we learned, and you're welcome to use this as you reference your test in just a minute here. If I go to the actual test itself, the paper form looks like this. Your form online is going to be a little bit different. You would go to our connected page. You obviously have the student edition on your page. And over here on the right hand side again, you're going to have those assignments and projects. If those quizzes are still listed here, I'll take those down. But if there's there are still listed, you can't see your test, you click the See All button right there, and it should bring you to a more extensive list of what is still assigned. A lot of times after you've taken a quiz and I have the opportunity to grade it, I'll take it off there so it's less confusing on how you would access that. You click on that connected page and it will take you to the test. Now your test should look the same as mine, but in the future the test might look a little bit different because I might click on the scramble button when I'm assigning the test online. That way the questions aren't in the same order, and number one for one person isn't the same as number one for another person. But for today, the first time we're taking this test, we're going to start from the top of the page like we're actually in class where we have this piece of paper in front of us, and we're going to go through each section. I'm going to show you the directions for each section and then give you a little bit of help and pointers on how to complete each section. The first is true and false. Indicate whether the statement is true or false. If the statement is false, rewrite it to make it true. So you'd read through all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If it's true, write a T. If it's false, write an F, and then rewrite the statement. The first one I'll give to you. A year is defined as 368 days. That's false. A year is 365 and 1/4 days. That quarter day is why every 4 years we have that leap year. In the second portion, we have matching. So we had true, false, now matching. Match each of the items with its description. What I would do here is have your textbook, either your online textbook or the physical textbook itself, and look up these specific terms in the glossary at the end of the book that have definitions, or look for the highlighted terms right in the context of your reading. If you find what desalination means, you're going to find that item here. The process of producing safe drinking water would be removing that desalinating, removing that salt so you can drink it. You'd put A right in this portion here. The rest of those I'll let you solve on your own through that vocabulary acquisition and demonstrating your learning. In the third portion, this is multiple choice now. Indicate the answer, the choice that best answers the question. So only one of these is the best answer. Okay? Numbers 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 are multiple choice. Now, in the midst of these multiple choice questions, there are a number that are going to come right from either our summary or our context of what we learned in our reading. There are others that are going to be a document-based question or something that's based on either an excerpt, a table, a map that you're going to have to solve. In this case, let's look at numbers 16 and 17. It says based on the excerpt. That means you have to read this in order to answer these two questions. A peninsula is a long, narrow area that extends into a river, lake, or an ocean. Peninsulas at one end are connected to a large landmass. An isthmus is a narrow strip of land connecting two larger landmasses. One well-known isthmus is the Central America country of Panama. Panama connects two massive continents, North America and South America. It is the narrowest place in the Americas. Number 16. Based on the excerpt, why do you think the country of Panama was chosen as the site for which is known as the Panama Canal? Panama Canal is the man-made structure, this water resource where ships can travel through the main part of Panama, and it gets you from what would be the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic Ocean, access to the Pacific Ocean without having to drive all the way around, take your boat or ship all the way around South America. Why would they pick Panama the place to do this? It says right here, it's the narrowest place in the Americas. So when they built this canal, this man-made river, they wanted the shortest area to cut through the land. I would say that 16 is letter C. Number 17, based on the excerpt, what is a peninsula? All right, so based on the excerpt means look at the reading itself and find your answer in the context of the reading. The first sentence says, a peninsula is a long, narrow area that extends into a river, lake, or an ocean. Let's match that with one of our definitions provided here. Peninsula is a landmass that extends into a man-made canal. Not correct. B, a peninsula is a landmass that extends into natural waters. Extends into river, lake, or ocean. That one sounds pretty good, but let's look at the others. A peninsula is a landmass that is completely surrounded by water. It extends into a river, lake, or ocean. That means it's surrounded almost on three sides, but not completely. D, a peninsula is a narrow strip of land that connects two other landmasses. Now, that's an isthmus. So we can eliminate A and D. Between B and C, the best of those answers is one that extends because it's not completely surrounded. For 17, I would write B. Read through the excerpt and then answer those two questions. In the next portion, 18 and 19 say based on the table. We should probably look at the table and then get our information from that table to answer these questions. Here you have what's listed as the years and the events of major earthquakes, volcanoes, and or tsunamis that are happening. Based on the table, what have you learned in this chapter? Which statement below would be the best conclusion? Earthquakes only occur in North America and South America. Let's see, earthquake in China, earthquake in San Francisco, earthquake in Haiti, earthquake in Japan. Well, that would be proven wrong. How about B? Volcanic eruptions rarely occur. I'm not sure that that's the best because volcanoes can be considered active or dormant, and if they're active, they're erupting all the time. C, disasters occur worldwide. Well, if you have from China to San Francisco to Hurricane Katrina here in the United States, Mount Vesuvius, you've got all sorts of different places in the world. And letter D, China has more earthquakes than Haiti does. Well, one of them was listed in China, one of them was listed in Haiti. I don't think we can concur that information completely. So I would say that 18's best answer is letter C. Disasters occur worldwide. 19. Based on the table and what you have learned in this chapter, which ocean has the most earthquakes? Well, we studied what was called the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is going to be surrounding the Pacific Ocean. If you take a look here, you have Japan, you have San Francisco, you have China, all near the Pacific Ocean. That Ring of Fire that is surrounding that Pacific plate is where a lot of that activity takes place. I'd say 19 is letter D. Let's wrap up our video for today and get you started on your test. Number 20 says, explain how human actions have damaged the world's water supply. What can people do to prevent further damage to this precious resource? Here's our essay question. It means we're going to answer the following questions in complete sentences, not necessarily on a separate sheet of paper. If we were taking this on paper, you'd write on the back of this page, but because you're typing this online, we're going to kind of go through what Mr. Shane is looking for. First, it says explain how human actions have damaged the world's water supply. I'm going to make a list and then write those things out in a more uniformed paragraph to explain what's going on. Well, how do humans damage the world's water supply? You're probably immediately thinking of ways in which we pollute. Factories dump waste into waterways, the chemicals that are on our streets from our vehicles that are emitting different types of pollution, those things, oil, gasoline, the exhaust, that stuff lands on our streets, and then when it rains, it goes into our sewer system that eventually gets into waterways. Chemicals used on lawns, so lawn fertilizers, or in farm fields, or pesticides, or things that kill weeds, when that rains, that runoff can get into our water system as well. As a result, that's going to damage the world's water supply. When people throw things away, when they are disposing of things, they might throw things right into the water itself. The ocean has a ton of plastic simply floating in it because of pollution. So I'd take some of those things that Mr. Shane just mentioned and put them into a sequence of my own words. How do humans damage the world's water supply? Well, humans do this, 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 and this, what I just mentioned. If you need to replay the video, pause now, go back, listen to that quick little explanation that I gave you. And then it says, what can people do to prevent further damage? Well, when these things get into our water resources, a lot of rivers, lakes, oceans, even groundwater are polluted and or poisoned. If that's going on, we've got to find a way to eliminate not only the pollution that's there, but to prevent it in the future. What can people do to prevent further damage? Well, instead of throwing things away, why don't we have improved ways of recycling? If we were to use less water, there would be less of a way in which that water is going to be going into what would be our natural resources. If we were to find alternative forms of transportation so that our vehicles aren't dumping the different oils and fossil fuels and gases that we're burning that get onto streets and then go into waterways, that way we could solve that. If I were to sum it up, I would say that the best way is to try and practice the least amount of chemical usage as possible. Use things that are more natural, that are not going to damage, but there's also the truth that what we're doing as humans, we're supposed to use our earth based on what God has given us. Doesn't mean that we're supposed to abuse it. So people should be careful on how they're using their water resource and what they're putting into that water resource. If things get too bad, if the water gets so toxic, if there's so much pollution in the air, it can actually cause acid rain. When there's all those different types of chemicals that get actually into the atmosphere, when it rains down, it's raining down some acidic water that can hurt plants and animals and water resources such as fish and the vegetation that's inside of our water. That hurts our ecosystem overall, which is going to affect you and me. What I would summarize that last sentence as, what can people do to prevent further damage? We should limit pollution by promoting things like recycling and or clean forms of energy. We can continue to clean up what has been damaged already, and to promote a more clean, healthy lifestyle with how we are using certain types of products and consuming certain types of resources. If you listen to that section again, hopefully you can put together 3 to 4 to 5 sentences how to explain how humans damage the world's water supply and what we can do to prevent us from further damaging this precious resource.